This is question E from the Unit 4 sample FRQs. The Federal Reserve can influence the supply of money, is the preface. Part A. Assume that the Federal Reserve targets a lower federal funds rate. Now remember, the federal funds rate is the rate that banks charge to other banks for borrowing money. Part 1 of A. What open market operation can the Federal Reserve use to achieve the lower target rather? So first of all, the biggest problem that students have with this is that they read the phrase open market operation as tool of monetary policy. And they do something like they can lower interest rates or they can lower the reserve requirement. That's not the answer. Open market operation, if you remember from the tools of monetary policy, can only be one of two things. It's either buy or sell bonds. So if we want interest rates to be lower, we want there to be a bigger money supply because we want money to be very, very plentiful and easy to borrow, therefore cheaper. So we want to buy bonds in order to make this happen. Because we're going to buy bonds, this is going to make interest rates lower. So if you picture what a money market graph looks like, look at the money supply getting bigger. Now nominal interest rates are going to get lower. Therefore, because the relationship between interest rates and bond prices is inverse, if interest rates are lower, then the price of bonds will increase. For part B, we're supposed to graph what we just did in part A. So we should have a money market graph with the supply of money shifting to the right. So let me just show you this. So part A, buy bonds, they will increase in price. And then in the next piece, we have a money market graph with the supply of money shifting to the right. Then it says, assume that the Federal Reserve buys government bonds from commercial banks. Based on this transaction, will the level of required reserves in commercial banks increase, decrease, or remain the same? The key phrase here is required reserves. Required reserves are the reserves that banks can't loan out. If banks are given more liquidity because the Federal Reserve buys bonds, please remember, that means the Fed wants banks to loan out money. So it would be counterintuitive for banks to have to keep some of it in their required reserves. When the Fed purchases bonds, 100% of that money goes into excess. So the answer to C is they would stay the same. D is really, really easy, and it's just a definition question. Do you know your vocabulary? Another monetary policy action involves changing the discount rate. Define discount rate. The discount rate is the interest rate that who charges banks? The Federal Reserve. So that's question E. Pretty simple.